So hey guys, we are live finally. Let us see how many people have joined in now. Oh, a lot of comments on the stream. So let me say welcome guys. Cool. Let's wait for a few more minutes for more people to join and then we'll start the session. Let me spread the word once. Cool. So people are going to start joining in. So yeah. So today's session is going to be very special as this was one of the most awaited session of this year or this chapter of BSc HIT. Um, Everyone was like too much excited about learning about open source and how to get into this world of open source. So we have come with Hritik as well as some special guests who are going to introduce you to the world of open source and are going to answer all your doubts and queries regarding how to enter into this world of open source and how to start contributing to some popular projects or some mediocre projects or whatever projects you want, right? So, uh, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Hritik on the channel. So, hey Hritik,
Hi
what's up?
Fez, hi Fez, and everyone
Yeah,
over here. How are you?
yeah. So, I'm leaving this stage on your hands. Okay. So, proceed
Yeah,
on with this session. Best of luck.
sure. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone to this session on open source and somewhat tilt about Google Summer of Code. Without further ado, I'll quickly dig right in. So first of all, who am I lecturing you about open source and things like that? So right now, I am a contributor, or you can say maintainer, as well at Wonderful Code, an open source organization. It's a very good organization, and I have some contributions in the Linux kernel. And I hope you can see the screen now. I forgot to edit. And I have a little bit of contribution in DWM, the Dynamic Window Manager, and a little bit here and there. And I'm a security researcher and a Python developer part time. So that's about me. Hello, everyone. Use Wiley's. Okay, and this is a paradigm that I am following, and I have borrowed it from a special guest who is present over here. I'll start with the context of this presentation. So let's first begin with what is open source that's available to you. It's I think everyone knows this already that it's a source code of some software and not just source code. It could be a lot of different things that is available for free modification and redistribution, and there are a variety of licenses you can choose from for a variety of different types of product that you are creating. Now, whenever you think of open source, what first comes in your mind is GitHub or GitLab, right? They are there and they are very big hosting providers for open source, and that's great. And we'll also talk about events like Hacktoberfest, GSOC, and LFX, Season of KD, and there are a ton more. I'm going to explore each and every one of them, I suppose, by the end of this presentation. Next, the problem that we are going to solve. First is academics doesn't really align with reality. Well, this is the harsh truth, but it is as it is for quite some years now. And I hope you all understand. What you read is, I mean, I don't know how much percentage of it you really get to implement in your real life. While you're programming in your university, how do you know what is a good code? Is a good code a code that gives you enough marks? Is it a code that compiles without any errors? Is that a code that is very much optimized for some specific use cases? Is premature optimization good? I mean, what is good code? How can you figure out? Because after you pass your exams, you passed your exam. What's next? While programming, you need mentors. Where do you find those mentors? Who is there to teach you? Of course, you have seniors, but seniors like me are also students, right? So we can ment you, but how much? Not a lot. You need someone better, right? Next, and something very close to my heart that I review close to my heart is competitive programming. One question would be why competitive programming? I mean, there are many reasons. You could play Sudoku, you could play chess, but why competitive programming? Does it has to do anything with programming at all? Is it just competitive? I mean, I don't know. We'll talk about that. And freshers, when we get in our first years, everyone is excited with computer science and what we have in our mind. We want to develop something into a virtual world of computer science. Is that possible? But how do we do that? Where to start? It's a huge world. How do you navigate into it? Of course, there are solutions to all of them. And quickly, I will get into these solutions as well. Well, the first one is academics don't align with reality. We cannot expect with that, sorry. What is a good code? Well, in open source, we have a ton of open code to explore. So you might encounter that there is no absolute good code, but there are some guidelines. And it's not just textbooks that you can read to figure out what's the best guideline for your code. But what you can do is you can literally try and experiment with open code present out there. You can send pull requests, you can send them patches, and check if your code is really acceptable in this real world. How does it that way? And you'll have a good idea of what is a good code, where to find mentors. I'll give you 1 second to guess. Open source project maintainers. I mean, they are already maintainers. They are maintaining your projects. What's the problem if they are mentoring you as well? I mean, you are contributing to their project, and they'll be helping you learn some new cool stuff. And that's something that helps both ways, and it's really exciting. Competitive programming? Nope. It's not required in open source. You can do it in your pastime. It could be a fun task to do, but that's about it. Let's move on because we have a lot to cover today. About freshers, totally welcome. Every open source organization really wants new people to contribute into their project. Even right now, if I am a maintainer of one project or maybe some of my personal projects, I want someone to come over here and provide their perspective of the project and tell me if there are any better improvements because every human thinks differently and we could use that. Next one is where to start with all of this. I talked a lot about what the are solutions, and these are very abstract. But one of the biggest question I got in the form was where to start with all of this. You have no idea. The simplest bit would be just pick one project and maybe understand that project a little bit. Maybe go to the README, the contributing documentation, and the users as well, probably. And then you can go send a pull request or a merge request or a patch or whatever that is called. You can send a better code than what is already existing. Of course, that's not going to be any better. You think that it is better, but it's not. And it will get reviewed and it will come back to you and you'll refine and review, refine, review, refine, review, and slowly you will get to a point where you also know what the good code is. You also know the entire structure of that project that you're trying to contribute to as well. So it's going to help you both ways. So don't fear that what you're contributing is wrong or it's something not up to the marks, because if that's the case, you'll get to know about that as well. So just go ahead. The maintainer will tell you how it goes there. And if you want something structured, just don't want to jump out there and just find everything on GitHub. Of course, you can look at programs like Google Summer of Code. other programs like Linux Foundation mentorships and Season of KD and many other programs. You can jump into them, and they will guide you through a very structured mechanism of how to enter into an open source organization's contributions, because you have to qualify for some criteria, and then you can move on with that. Next part is uh, something about beginner friendly projects. This is something I got in the forms uh, significantly as well. What are some beginner friendly projects? Where can we contribute to? Well, trust me, every project is beginner friendly if the beginner is friendly enough. If you go to our organization that I'm working in, About Code, we love beginners. I mean, you'll meet someone who loves beginners as well. And if you ask questions that are good enough, you can get any project that you like. You can get into some of the major projects that have already appeared in past years Google Summer of Codes. So if they have appeared in 2021, they might appear in 2022 as well. So that's some side quest that you can have for Google Summer of Code. But apart from that, you can of course contribute over this as well. Linux kernel, people fear from that kernel because it's huge and there are a lot of code base. You don't know how to contribute, but there are channels on IRC, Internet Relay Chat, Gitter, Slack, a lot of different channels, a lot of different places where people are just hanging around trying to just talk to people. You can go over there and then figure out if there is something that they require. Is there something that you should go ahead with? One thing that you should do as a beginner in an open source organization is research and then ask. Don't just go ahead and then ask very simplistic questions whose answers you can find in the documentation, because then you're wasting maintainers' time, and that's not good. You have to properly read the documentation. It's not one day job. It might span over to a week or maybe 5 days or something like that. But you have to sincerely read the documentation. You have to research a bit, and it is totally possible that you don't understand a part of it. And then you can construct a very good question that you don't understand and then ask that question. The last part would be follow some set of rules, net etiquettes, and it's going to be a very simple set of rules that's around there on the internet. It's not just very concrete rules, but it's something that you should follow while talking to people or the internet. One of them would be listen before you speak. While someone is telling something to you on IRC, or maybe you're in Slack, or probably Gitter, or wherever you are. Just listen and read whatever they are talking about. You will slowly fit into the conversation. You can simply ask some question that they are already talking about. So you should, of course, listen before you speak. Don't spam. Never re-repeat your questions. You can re-repeat your question if you have repeated it like 2 or 3 days back, because there might be someone who didn't listen it. But don't do it very often on a single day or maybe in a single hour, because if someone doesn't know answer to your question, they cannot answer it even if you write it 4 times. This is pretty obvious. You don't want to troll the people who are teaching you, and that's obvious as well. I will jump to details matter. What a lot of people go and ask question are like, hey, I tried to run this application and it's not working. Please help me. There's nothing that we can ever figure out from that phrase, that line. It's not working. I mean, a lot of thing in the world is not working, and you have to provide us with logs. You have to provide us with something that we can look at and figure out why it's not working. So there you have to provide details. You have to think about it that the person you are giving your issue to doesn't know you at all. He doesn't know, or they doesn't know your system. They doesn't know your setup. They don't know anything at all. So you have to provide details to them as much as you can, because more details are always better. They can skip, but they don't want to ask you again. And there are some rules for IRC that also apply to your normal chat clients as well, like Gitter and all. One thing would be just ask the question. Never go into a chat channel and ask, "Hey, is there any Python expert here?" and then stop. I mean, yes, of course, there could be Python experts here, but what do you want? Uh, and you can, there are people who would simply come and ask, "Hey, does anyone know how to configure Firebase?" And when I'm reading that question, I'm like, "Yes, I do." And the Firebase documentation does it as well. What do you want to ask? That's not a question you ask me. That's a question you ask Google. So just ask the question that you want to ask. It could be, "Hey, do you know iterators in Python? I'm having trouble with figuring out what is an iterator and what is an iterable." That could be a question, and you can give an example of a simple method or a function. "Hey, I think this is present there, but it's not working as I expect it to be, and I expect it to work it like this. Show how you expect it to work, and then proceed with your question." And most importantly, provide text code. Don't provide images in codes, because we want to rerun your code, right? We want to try it out if why it is not working. So try to provide as much as text you can as well. We cannot copy paste your images. This is also one important thing that I would like to mention, that a lot of people just go ahead and don't realize, is they hop in a channel and they will tag one single person. So I'll hop in a channel and I'll tag, "Hey Faz, do you know how do I set up um, Linux operating system in my computer?" Well, you know what? Direct messages are meant for that. You can DM that person, but you are asking in a channel, right? So what you should do is you should ask the entire channel, because if there are five or six different people who know answer to your question, they are not going to answer because you didn't ask them. As simple as that. So simply ask the channel. Don't add anyone if unless necessary. Just ask the channel, and of course, don't flood and ask question once, all at once. So if I have logs to my problem, if I have something, uh, what I tried, that abstract to my problem, and what didn't work, that to my problem, you have to ask everything at once in one single message. Because when, as the person who is going to answer, when they are going to look at the question, they want everything at one place. They don't want a single hi, and then after 10 minutes, your problem. After 20 minutes, what you tried and what didn't work. So try to ask everything at once. There could be splits, but that's something that you could at least try. And of course, I'll share the links to Net Etiquette as well. But try to follow all of these. They are really good. Uh, the articles prepared by really good people over there on the internet, and you can get a hang of it very soon enough. Another project would be a software that you're already using. You could simply contribute to that. So right now I'm using, let's say, DWM. It's a window manager. I think that something shouldn't be here, something should be here, and I want to change it. You can simply go ahead and talk to them in the forums, the maintainers, and even you might be able to write something for to fix your issue, and you'll start to get around the code base slowly after that. Now, this is my insight about how to get into open source. And as I already said, I'm just a senior. I'm not Linus or Philip. I mean, I'm not very experienced person. But who is? Hey, Philip. Hi there. Uh, I think we cannot hear you.
Yes, of course. You cannot have a good online discussion without having some sound problem, can you?
No way.
Yeah, no. I said there's only one Linus. Thank you for the introduction. But there's only one Linus, so don't compare me to him. I'm not worthy.
So we have Philip here from Nextbee, and
Yep.
he was my and is my mentor in the current project that I'm working on, and the project I chose for my Google Summer Code. And I mean, there's a lot about Philip that I cannot summarize in one single call. He knows a lot of things that we don't, and that is quite obvious by the amount of experience he has already gathered. So, Philip, you'd
Well,
like to
that's
maybe
a
introduce
privilege.
yourself a little bit?
Yeah, that's the privilege of age. So welcome everyone. So my name is Philippe Omredan. I'm both French and American, and I live a good part of my time in Belgium. So and a good part of my time in California also, the years when there's no COVID disease and pandemics. So lately, not so much. I maintain several open source projects. I've been a long time Google Summer of Code mentor, actually probably for about 15 years now. I think I participated in the first or second one. And I'm also the CTO of a software startup, a US-based software startup that does tools to analyze open source software. So, and a lot of the tools we do are themselves free and open source. So, thank you for having me here with you.
Okay, thank you, Philip, for that introduction, and very nice to have you here. Now, I'm not just going to let you hang around here. I'm going to bombard you with some questions that everyone is waiting
Go for it.
to share the answers for. So we're going to see some of your experience that you have gathered over the year. Okay. So my first question to you would be, well, everyone thinks that open source is very convoluted or maybe very much requires a lot of expertise, because whenever we think of open source, what we think of is, oh, the Linux kernel. What we think of is, oh, Android operating system. I mean, that's open source. How am I going to contribute to that? So, I mean, that's a thought that even I had in the beginning. So how welcoming do you think open source is for beginners?
It really depends. It really depends. Most of the projects will be very welcoming if you are friendly. The thing is, and you nailed it when you presented it earlier, is how can you ask smart questions? There's actually an excellent place where you can go. A guy called Eric Raymond, who started opensource.org and really coined the name, not the one that coined the name open source, but is really an important person in this space, as a page that's called Asking Question the Smart Way. And being able to ask the question the smart way makes all the difference in being welcomed or not welcomed. It's always difficult, but I think we're doing it okay on our project. It's always difficult when you have someone which comes with an open question, says, "Hey, how do I start contributing?" It's a very open question. So here, actually, what we did is that we have a web page for that. But we're trying to be welcoming there. But generally speaking, the good thing to think about, the good analogy is to say, it's not much difference when you're online or offline. So say you want to go play with some folks that, I don't know, they're playing hockey or basketball, and you want to play with them. You don't just arrive there with your ball and says, "Hey, here I am. I want to play." You need to, it's a social, it's a social experience. So you need to introduce yourself, and eventually you stay on the sideline. And when there's someone that gets a bit tired, you says, "Hey, can I go and play and replace the player?" and this kind of thing. So think about the same way. There's no difference between that and the real world. We're all people.
That's a really good explanation of how you can, how open source is actually for beginners. And I think that analogy about playing a game and jumping into it, and that thing with open source is really good. And I think that's something everyone is going to keep in mind while jumping into a next game or next open source organization as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question to you would be, well, open source is very fun and games when you want to try to contribute. It's nice. You go to an organization, you contribute it, and you get some, applauses, and everyone is happy. You are happy. But at an industrial level, is open source relevant at all? How relevant is that? I mean, is it meaningful at all at industrial level?
So I wouldn't know exactly what you mean by industrial level, but if you were, let's say you have a magic wand, and you can, with the touch of a magic wand, you can remove every free and open source software of the world just with a touch of a magic wand. What's happening? Well, you don't have phone, you don't have computers, you don't have internet. Most of the industrial systems cease to work. All the communication stops. Cars don't run anymore. Planes don't fly. Boats don't sail. Electricity is not being distributed. Water, power plants stop working. So I think that if you were to effectively say, is this relevant from an industrial perspective? Well, if you remove it, everything stops cold.
Right.
And you may believe I may exaggerate there, but if you look in details about how free and open source software is embedded in everything we do, we use as both individual and organizations, countries, cities, companies, it's everywhere.
Indeed. Even the system I'm running on is on open source.
We wouldn't be able to do any of what we're doing today. And again, think about even proprietary phones like Apple phones, iPhones, are based massively on free and open source software. Roughly as much as you can find maybe in an Android phone.
Right. So yes, it is pretty very much relevant, open source is. So of course, if you take it up and proceed with open source, there is something good that's going to happen to you as well, because you're doing something good to the world. Well, now then there is a question that pops in our head is, well, open source is there, and I know that's good. So it's an apple that's at the top of a tree. I know it's sweet. I want to get it, but is there any roadmap that I can follow to go over there?
Not really. I mean, in the same way, if you were to tell me, taking the analogy I was taking earlier, it says, well, I want to learn play basketball with friends. There's no real roadmap which says, hey, this is how you can learn playing basketball with friends. You need to make friends. You need to find a place where they play basketball, and you need to learn the game. And how do you learn the game? A bit by reading, a bit by watching, and a bit by playing. The thing is, it's both about code, but it's also a social experiment. Again, it's about being social, being able to communicate and exchange with others. Otherwise, it wouldn't be super interesting. There are things that you could call open source projects, which may be super useful, where you have a developer, programmer that dumps some code on a web page. And the only thing you can do there is use the code. That's very nice. That's useful. That's great. But I wouldn't call that open source per se, because there's no way to, if there's no way to interact with the author, no way to contribute back, no way to even provide praise and kudos for the work that's been done. That's a bit less interesting, generally speaking. It can be super useful, but definitely not what I would call open source.
That pretty much covers the part where you find mentors. If there is no mentor or no maintainer, that's not open source, right?
That's a good point. That's a good way to think of it. So that, and I think it's really important also to understand that there's a set of licenses that define what is considered free and open source software. And it's not only about licensing. It's about licensing, but it's also about a way to develop, and a way to organize communities and really having some participation. You have a lot of businesses today that use open source in ways which are perfectly okay, but I wouldn't call open source either. Say you provide a commercial service, some kind of web service, and you create an SDK which is open source. That's perfectly okay. I wouldn't really call that open source. It's just a way to use your commercial tool. And it's important to understand that there's open source and open source. There's a lot of what I would call open washing. The same way you have people that talk about ecology and carbon neutrality and do greenwashing, even though they may not really be interested in having a sustainable planet. There's a lot of this also in free and open source software. And by the way, I insist on the term free and open source software. A bit of background. Historically, there's been really two branches in free and open source software. One, which is called free software, and that's the Free Software Foundation. And the idea is to say, we want to make sure that the freedom of users is not about politic freedom. It's about the freedom of software users. We want to make sure the freedom of software users is maintained for the long run. Open source is more concerned about ensuring that the software is accessible to everyone and less about the freedom of users. They come with different approach, different ethos. In the end, it's all about contributing the same shared commons of good stuff that can be shared with everyone. So sharing is really important there. And sharing is, it's not just dumping. Dumping is not sharing.
Right. Well, I think there is a proverb about that as well. The more you share, the more you learn. And that applies here as well. Next, this question is very special to all students over here. All the questions asked earlier were more or less very generic on how to board into open source, is that relevant and things like that. But this one is very, very special to students, because when we are students, first thing we have in our brain is a job after the fourth year, after the final year. We want a job, right? And everyone is applying for
That's useful.
jobs, interviews, right? Everyone is applying for interview and jobs. And what we are facing is competitive programming and questions and the sheets of question. All are mostly more or less competitive or maybe academic as well. And we already talked that that's not how open source works at all. So is there any way, can open source get us jobs as well? Does Nextbee do that? And are there other organizations?
So I will answer differently. Say you're in the Renaissance and you are Michelangelo, right? And you're just starting. And nobody has ever seen your paintings ever. To get your first painter assignment, you're going to prove your skills at painting, and nobody knows you're good, right? At this time, you're just starting. Nobody knows anything about you. And you're going to have to prove yourself. You're going to have to start painting things to show it to the world. Now, fast forward 10 years and you've painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Rome or some other stuff. Nobody will ask you for your credentials anymore. Right? They're out there, they're visible, they're open to everyone. And your problem is going to be more trying to find who's going to be the best patron for your next work. So now you're a student. You can be in those two modes. What I suggest is trying to be like Michelangelo after he became famous. Because then, for me, if I am a recruiter, if I can see your work in open source project done in the open, eventually I don't or barely need an interview, because I can see what you do, how you interact with others. Everything is there explicitly in the open. And frankly, it's much more interesting to me as a recruiter. So if I put my CTO hat for a second, it's much more interesting to me as a recruiter to see how you're able to work concretely on code and in community. It's a much better predictor of how you could integrate a team and be both a contributor, a productive contributor, and be able to realize yourself in this context than any kind of interview or programming test. For instance, I don't think that a question like, what is the time complexity of a hash table lookup has any bearing whatsoever on the ability of someone to succeed in a job and in life and being a worthy contributor in a business or a team. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of companies that still practice this kind of recruiting. One way to positively impact this is, even if you're shy, maybe many of you and many of us are shy, and it's difficult to be outside going and outgoing and be out there. Even if you're shy, being able to publish your work just changes everything about how you'll be able to have discussion with recruiters, which eventually will come to you rather than them that you coming to them. And again, the thing for me, it also widens your opportunities. You may be a very bad. You may be very bad at interviewing and being terrible at answering questions and just stuttering when you're being asked about the big O notation of the hash table lookup thing, and completely use your countenance and not be able to answer any of that. And it may be difficult for you to answer unplanned questions and things like that. It doesn't mean that you cannot be a wonderful software engineer, which, by the way, leads me to a second thing, is what we're doing in general is not programming, it's not coding. We're doing what I call engineering, and a simple definition of engineering is to say it's programming over time. And it's really important because you're learning a lot of things, and it's important that you learn a lot of things which sometimes you feel are not useful in your university. They are. It's important to have a background on many things, even if you feel that they don't have a direct application in your job. One thing you do is that you're going to have many assignments. One day you may be asked to program something in Java, say a hash table in Java. The next day you will be learning about pointers in C, right? And the duration of this assignment is usually a couple of days, a couple of weeks, and then you're done and you switch to something else. When you do engineering, that's not the way things work. You write code, but you write also the test. You design and document, and you're worrying about how this code will be used and read 6 months, a year from now. If you are not able to read your code and understand what it does 6 months from now, then you're doing a bad job when you're doing engineering. That's probably okay in a university setting, but when we program open source code, or at least when I program open source code, and I program open source code the same way I program any code, I'm thinking about, how am I able to convey the design and the intention of my code to others? Because programming over time is what we do, it's engineering. And that means code is being written once, and you read that hundreds or 1,000 times. And if your program is successful in open source, it can be hundreds of thousands of times. So it's important in this context to understand that writing the code is hundreds of the problem. Being able to make code that can be understood and read by others is what matters.
Right.
That was my long answer there. So now, short answer to, can I get a job by contributing to open source? Yes, 100% yes. I think that's the very best way to be able to get the best jobs you could think of in tech in general. And it's unique in the sense that there's not many other areas of human endeavors where you can so easily participate and make your work known in order to help you build a resume. Say if you're doing social science studies or archaeology, it's not that easy, right?
Right.
Here you have this unique chance to be able to participate, build skills, and at the same time build your resume. And more important than anything, also have some fun. Because if you don't have fun, you're probably missing it out in the end. It's not fun for the sake of fun, because again, some of the things may not always be super fun. It's laborious, Writing documentation is essential. Sometimes you're going to come back to a piece of code 100 times, just to make sure it's written the correct way, and you convey the intent of the algorithm the right way, and it can be easy to understand, easy to read. So sometimes it can be laborious, but it can be very fulfilling too.
Right. So that's very detailed information about getting jobs by open source. But I've asked you one straightforward question. Do you know maybe one or two companies who take people based on open source?
So Nextbee, we hiring exclusively folks that have some involvement in open source. So it's not some, is that it's a mandate for us. We wouldn't be recruiting anyone that's not been involved in free and open source. If you think about very large tech companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook, a lot of their employees have been hired because they were open source maintainers or open source contributors on projects that matter to Google or matter to Facebook or matter to Twitter. So is there a way to get a job because of open source? Yes. And I think it's, if you think about competitive programming as a way to get a job, nobody cares about competitive programming in a business setting, because that's not what we do. We don't do one-time assignments which last a couple hours or a couple days. We do programming over time. That's called engineering. It's in the overtime. It's really overtime that matters. Now, can you get a job without open source skills, open source involvement? You sure can, but that will be much harder. Think of it as an accelerator and facilitator. Not only you're gaining skills, but also you're exposing your abilities to everyone. And you're exposing it in a way that's completely independent of the interview skills you may have. And the less, I guess, the less of these interview skills you have, the more you should focus on open source to help you being able to bypass these. The other thing is, ever since we had this pandemic, everyone everywhere in the world is working from home, which means also that location doesn't mean anything much anymore, right? What does it mean to work for a company if everybody's at home? The way we've always been working on open source project has been this way. Everybody's been working remotely. So the skills you are gaining by participating in open source communities are directly contributing to your ability to work remotely for a company in a both productive way for your employer and fulfilling way for yourself, because it's not always easy to be remote and alone.
Right. So with open source, we have already tackled a lot of problems, and this resume problem can also be tackled via just contributing and showing your contributions on open source. And as Philip just mentioned, that there's like Philip himself would hire you if you're good in open source. I mean, that's okay. You have somewhere to go, so don't worry about it. Just dig in deep in, go ahead with open source. And thank you, Philip, so much for being with us and taking out time to come here for us. Appreciate it a lot.
Well, thank you very, very much for getting me around, getting me in your presentation. So,
yeah. Okay. Thank you, Philip. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentation. We have a little bit more exciting thing coming on along your way. So, so let's carry on right away. See you, Philip.
hey, thank you, everyone. See you online.
Okay. So that was Philip. Next would be my journey at Google Summer of Code. Now I understand that we sold this entire presentation to you as an entry-level entry level guide to Google Summer of Code, because that's something that a lot of people want to get into. And before you even know thing or two about open source, you get to hear about Google Summer of Code. And yes, I will do my part. I don't know the exact guide to get into Google Summer of Code, but I'm going to tell you what I did during my time. And maybe that's helpful for you. Maybe you can talk to other people. But this is a very quick and concise way of how I got Philip to like me into the organization. So here's what I picked up. I simply went on GSOC portal and I picked up with a resonating description. Any project that I like. I was not quite sure about which project I'm going to accept in, and I didn't have a lot of time as well. I started pretty late for GSOC, so I was like, yeah, I want to get into Google Summer of Code this year because, of course, that means something, and that's very interesting. It pays well as well initially, so it's something there. I wanted to get in. And one resonating description had about code. I figured out there was a code called vulnerable code. And as I told you in the beginning that I am a security researcher in part-time, vulnerable code had to do something about security. So we are collecting an entire database of vulnerability from across the world. So it does contribute to cybersecurity in one way or another. And that was something that I resonated with as well. And I wanted a language of my choice. Of course, you don't just want to appear for GSOC in a very different language. I wouldn't just go ahead and say, "Hey, I want to do GSOC in Rust." I'm like, I don't even know Rust. I don't even know one line of Rust. And maintainers are there as my mentors, but they are not going to teach me the basics. I have to learn the basics of the language. So choose a language that you already know. Maybe even a little bit of. You can understand the one-page code, or you can understand the code that's written in front of you. Maybe you cannot write perfect code, but you can read some substantial amount of code. So pick a project in that language. And of course, if you go to GSOC portal, that's if you just look up GSOC on Google and oh, sorry, on DuckDuckGo, because why not? And then go ahead at organizations. You're going to find a lot of organizations who are there. See, about code is at the top as well. You can click on the organization and you will have the technologies that they want you to have. And just go ahead, read the description, read the technologies. And it's not required that you know the technology, you know the description, you use the product. But if you know the technologies, you know a little bit of them, maybe you know C, C++, you know a little bit of Rust. Let's dig into this project and let's find out how the maintainers are, how they talk, and what's going on over there. Second was I started with a very small issue. I didn't have this option to just go into a new project and say, hey, I'm going to give you a new complete framework change for your project. I couldn't do that. That's totally out of league. So I did started with a small issue. I even remember it was a simple command line, kind of a typo, but something that would cause errors in the long run. So it was one word issue that I fixed, and we started from there. And I adopted one model called 1PRPD. I'm going to tell you what this is. This is something crazy that I did because I wanted to get into GSOC. So every day there were lots of issues in Vulnerable Code, my project. We have like 150 issues, and those issues are not problems. They are things that we need to do and things that have been noted. And that's the case with a lot of open source organizations as well. So I'd go to the issues, and I got this calendar that I pasted at the back of my laptop. What I'll do is every day I'll strike off one day from that calendar. And then I guess 29th was the last day for GSOC, so it's like all yellow. So I had to get in. I had to make sure that I at least worked on one PR per day. So one pull request per day. I didn't have to submit one pull request per day, but I had to deeply work on one pull request per day. And slowly the quality of my pull requests got better. I even submitted a lot of pull requests before getting accepted into vulnerable code as well. So this was my strategy. I was like, hey, Philip is there and he wants people to contribute, right? If I'm going to contribute with my whole heart out, I'm going to contribute every day, of course I'm going to stand out. And this was my strategy. I adopted one PRPD. Of course, you can try it out. Next was my Jiffy Man. So I have named it Jiffy is a very small unit of time, and Man is for manager. So it's kind of a timetable manager for me. You can try out any timetable manager that you like, but this is something that I use personally, and in a way I have developed it for myself. So I have all the dates and a target for that day. You can see it's for March 21, and the vulnerable code is like pasted everywhere. Like I wanted to work on this. I wanted to work on this. This is my thing. And TU uses time units used. So one time unit could be half an hour or 1 hour or however you like feel like it. So for every, let's say, half an hour, I'll work on vulnerable code, take this circle, and take a rest of 5 minutes, and then come back, and then repeat and go on so forth, so on and so forth. These are the number of blocks. I never. I once filled the entire thing, but uh, that's how it went. And the most important part was these ticks. After I feel that, hey, this day was meaningful to me and it worked out, I'll just go ahead and tick that day. You can see that Tuesday, second, Wednesday, third are crossed. That means that I wasted that entire day. I didn't do anything at all. So you can do that as well as a reflection of how much you are really working and how much time you are wasting. And trust me, we waste a lot of time while developing. We just get over to somewhere else. We watch YouTube. We read some different projects documentation, and that's it. So you can have a time management system for you as well. This is my thing. You can develop your own. No problem there. And this is how I just went right ahead into vulnerable code and talk. Talk a lot. There's something you cannot fill without talking. You can contribute into whatever organization you want, but you have to take responsibility of your pull request or your patch or your merge request. You have to reply to the questions of maintainer why you are doing the things this way, because you might feel that you are the smartest person in the world, but you are not. The maintainers know better about the project, and they will tell you what you are doing wrong, and you have to talk to them and talk to them regularly, especially during the GSOC. And this was the proposal that that I wrote. I mean, not exact this thing. I would talk back and forth in the channel, not about my proposal, because that's going to give you a very bad impression. You are just there for GSOC. You don't want that. You want to be there for the project. And that's actually the reality. Even after GSOC, it's been 1 month or two. I'm still in vulnerable code. I still contribute, and it's a project that I have literally adopted. It's like my child. I cannot leave it. So that's going to happen. So just make it happen beforehand itself. Talk to your mentors about the problems in the project, about the improvements in the project, and whatever you can think of. And sometimes, just sometimes, you can talk about your proposal as well. And of course, the maintainer, if they are happy, they'll be happy to assist you with your proposal. And I mean, like, I had lucky maintainers. Philip literally helped me with typos in my proposal and small things that were wrong in the proposal. Good maintainers are going to help you over there as well. And if you put your heart in, every maintainer is a good maintainer. Understand the project needs, talk regularly, and of course, follow these set of rules that we talked about, the etiquettes that you should have while you are talking to people on the internet. That was about my Google Summer of Code. And that's what I told you. But uh, is open source all about Google Summer of Code in colleges? Is there something else that you can contribute to? Because even though Google Summer of Code is open source, there is competition, of course. Maybe there is a little bit competition, but if you are there and there is like 5 or 6 people other that are present and working on the same project, there is competition amongst you all. One thing, don't have bad competition. Maybe help your other peers. I mean, doesn't matter. Just help them. But in the off chance that you don't get selected in Google Summer of Code, is that it? Is that end of your college open source career? No, someone is shouting here in the background. No, that's not the case. And who that is? Are there other opportunities? Yes. Hey, Divya. Welcome to the stage.
Hi. Yes, it's true. I was shouting no. Okay. Hi, guys.
Right. So I actually saw Divya from the backstage that, yeah, she was shouting, no, there is more than open source, more than Google Summer of Code for open source. But what's that, and what has Divya done about that? So, Divya, can you give us a brief introduction about yourself and your journey in open source?
Yeah, so like everyone, even I was afraid, and this is a story literally last year. Second year, I was in second year last year, so I was also afraid, like, I'll see these big issues and read the documentation. The biggest mistake, don't go read the documentation, just go and see the issues, how what you can solve. So yeah, so that's how I can't do that. And something told me this year that maybe I can go for GSOC. And it's pretty much popular. GSOC is pretty much popular in India more. So the first thing you say that you want to contribute to open source, go to, why don't you try GSOC? So so that was it. And at around February, I got one project, again some project, and I thought, just because I was a bit interested into security, so I'll just go and check about OWASP. And some people might be acquainted with what OWASP is, but basically they do testing on web applications, and they have a lot of security projects. And that's how I went there, and I got one project that was something close to what I was working that time, or what I was really interested in. It was an OSINT thing, open source intelligent thing, and we had to make some things. And and I did it. All right. I made some coded some code, and one month I did it, and I thought, like, this is really, I'm not really enjoying this. Okay, I'm not really getting the joy of open source, as they say. So I tried about going other places. I searched open source contributions. Literally, I googled it. Another thing, I did an internship search. I did a mentorship search, and there I came across Linux Foundation. And yeah, so when I went to Linux Foundation, I saw that there are many organizations. Um, there are many organizations actually, and whatever was easy for me, I went and checked out few organizations. I saw they were more into the kernel part, the more different, really different, not really into web applications or anything Android or anything. So I checked with one organization that's called Open Mainframe Project, and yeah, that's the T-shirt I'm wearing. So I went to this Open Mainframe Project and I checked what they do, and I saw that mainframes are really active these days, and I was like, how is that possible? We should really check out what mainframes are. And they are pretty much still existent, and they are working way better than what they really think it is. So they had many projects, and yeah, that's how I came across one project that's called Software Discovery Tool, and I signed up for it. I said that I want to participate in this, and the thing was really easy. The interview part was really easy. They mailed me and they asked me, what do you want to do, how you want to participate in this, what are you good at, and what languages do you prefer. And I said, and I answered all the things quite honestly, and that's how I became an LFX mentee, basically. Yeah,
So
that
that's
was
about
3 months
Divya
journey.
in Olympics Multi, and thank you for that sharing that experience with us. I'll ask you one objective question here. Did they have anything to do with competitive programming in at mainframe, open mainframe? That's
I
objective
am
question. Yes or no? Just
horrible in competitive programming.
so there you
No,
go, folks.
no, I'm horrible in it. So, yeah,
So she got
nothing.
a
No.
mentorship in the Linux Foundation. And that's the foundation that also funds the Linux kernel as well. And a lot of maintainers that are working on Linux kernel, that like Greg or Shoa Khan or a lot of other people, they are actively mentoring on the Linux Foundation. So you get to get those people who are actively working on the Linux kernel. They will be assisting you with different projects. And there are other projects as well. So, Divya, a lot of people already are acquainted with how the structure of Google Summer of Code is. You open the page and you see a lot of organizations over there, and you apply for an organization, and then you talk to them, and so on and so forth. You get selected. So, is the same structure present at LFX, or is there any difference over there?
So if you go to the mentorship link, you'll be seeing a lot of organizations listing. They don't actually list the organizations, they actually list what exactly project is going on in that season for a different for a particular organization. So it's like open mainframe project, documentation for this is project, and it's open. Do you want to apply? Yes or no. So that's how it is done. So so you what you do is you just go and sign up for it. Sign up is basically you have to send your resume. You have to say that yes, my college is allowing time for me to so that I can contribute to it, and you have to send us cover letter saying that why do you want to contribute. Yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it. And if it's good enough, if your resume is good enough, which is usually so my resume was not that good, but it showed that I was really into what I was doing on my own, small things, and my GitHub repo. Those helps actually. So those.
So that's the exact thing that Philip just said, told us about. That if you have those open source contributions in your resume, you are going to stand out at mentorships like LFX as well. So LFX was a great opportunity for Divya, I'm sure, and Divya is still associated with the Open Mainframe project. And when you get into a certain project like that, you have a whole can of opportunities open to you. You have a lot of people who talk to you, and life shows you another way from there. But there's one thing that I'm sure everyone is curious right now. That yeah, okay, LFX is pretty good. It sounds exciting. We will search about it. But GSOC pays monetarily. Does open source? Sorry, does LFX do that as well? Is there any stipend for your internship?
Yes, the thing is, open source actually welcomes new contributors, and in the world where people are getting in a rat race, but in a rat race of going into competitive coding and getting selected to big companies, there is a much more demand for people who wants to contribute to open source, because that those are the people that really is supporting the industry basically. So they welcome and they value every single contribution, even one PR. There are organizations too that awards you for every one PR you successfully merge. All right, that's another thing also. So yes, LFX pays. There are other seasons as well where they don't pay, they just pay for college credits and all that. But yeah, in my season they did pay, and it's really much more than GSOC.
Okay, that's for some time else. But
Yeah.
we know that right. Let's keep that up. So we know that
Right.
LFX pays as well, and it gives you people exposure to people, great people like contributors from Linux kernel themselves and other projects as well. Who knows? Maybe even our project About Code will be on LFX someday. It could be. It might not be. I mean, as the open source maintainers at About Code, I'm sure Philip doesn't really care. It's in GSOC or in LFX. So we care about the newcomers who are going to come and contribute. They could be from any source, and because LFX is also very much popular, uh, we don't know, anything could happen. So of course you should find out other pathways, and we won't be comparing which one is better than particular one, because there are different difficulties, maybe different peculiarities for every project. There are different people associated with every project, so we won't go and compare these things. But what we'll do is we'll show you the opportunities. Also, Divya took an initiative of finding a lot of different alternatives to GSOC and other opportunities that are out there that you can contribute to, and figure out how that works. So, Divya, can you quickly tell us about that as well?
Yeah. So right now, when we entered in fourth year, actually there were many people who were actually there were many less people in HIT that were actually looking for opportunities, into open source contributions, and in those organizations, and interacting with such things. And so what we did was 2-3 people, not just me, I just created the issue, but 2-3 people came together, and we thought that why not just make a list out of it. And yeah, there you go. So the list is in the chat. You can go to that and please, if anyone is still there who does not find a particular thing inside that list, please do give a comment. I'll definitely add it. So it's more than there are so many people who have done things, so you can really go and ping each and one of them, or you can really reach out to GDSC separately. So please do check that out.
So that's about LFX and other opportunities from Divya. So yeah, we got you. We brought you here with GSOC in mind, and we kind of lured you in here. But I hope that we are sending you back with a bigger message that there are a lot of different opportunities, including GSOC and other open source opportunities as well, and you will go excel over there rather than wasting your time about it. So that's from me and Divya and Philip together. So I think that would be the end of our stream. Right, Fez? And back to you. Fez, you there?
Guys,
Yeah, that was an awesome session. Thanks a lot, Hritik, Devi, and Philip, for coming to this session and telling people over that open source is not just limited to GSOC, and that it's not too much of a big challenge to enter into the world of open source. You just need to be a bit more social level and to have an open mind, that you and a bit of self confidence to and a bit of problem solving curiosity to get into this world. Okay, and start contributing to your first issue on open source. So I guess this was an awesome session, and again, once again, thanks a lot to all of you. So let's conclude this session. Thanks a lot to everyone who attended this in the comments. Goodbye.
bye bye.
Bye now. Bye bye, everyone.